Hey everybody, I'm Eric Airlock, and this is another talk on Buddhist philosophy, Zen Buddhism, and the lectures and lessons of Linji. And my cats deciding to have a bit of a squabble before anybody tries to split any cat or cats apart. With Joshu, which we will be getting to next. So I am going to power through the remainder of the Linji quotes. I'm going to try to keep, as mentioned, my commentary somewhat to the side because I want to get through making some videos about Joshu and the Koan collections, the Blue Cliff Record and the Gateless Gate. And that will finish out much of what I have to say about Zen. There are many other talks to give, but that will finish out much for the semester. So we're going to finish here with what the Linji record, with what Linji's life and record and talks tell us about his view on what Zen Buddhism is and how to practice koans, which is crucial for what's coming up. What he says, which, as I've been saying a lot, Linji's sermons, and I left this part for the end here, tell you very much what you should be looking for in koan practice more than anyone else puts it explicitly, and that's because Linji's house is the one that makes these texts a thing and puts them together as they are, including the patriarchs' records and Zen Buddhism as a whole. So what they think is important is what Linji very much thinks is important, and so what he tells you about koan cases and what is the sound of one hand clapping, we should all probably pay attention to before we stop hearing him and then listen for one sound clapping against a hand. Yes, and me misspeaking. Let's listen for that. And that's the cats, the screen door, and the beeping outside. That's as much as I can tell you. So, Linji says, and a lot of what I have to say is a lot of quotes of Linji from here on out, so I'm going to power through, and maybe this talk will be more around an hour, but I hope to quote the rest of this all here, and a lot of this, again, is essentially important. Guys, knock it off. Hey, buddy. Buddy. All right. So stop the fussing and the fighting. So Linji said, here at my place, come on over. We don't talk about who is a monk and who is a lay believer. Okay, so apparently ordination is just some kind of joke and doesn't matter. Pretty sure being a monk or a priest is specifically what they do here and dole out. He says, someone sits on a lonely mountain peak but has not yet removed themselves from the world. Another is in the middle of a city but has no likes or dislikes. Which one is ahead and which one is behind? He's implying that a monk who's left home, and when Buddhists say leave home, they mean have abandoned normal life in the monastery. Buddies, abandoned this lecture for the cats. Buddy, stop biting your brother. Stop it. We're trying to get the tiger to treat us as one of our own here. Well, the tiger and the Leo, they're doing their thing. So anyway, we got to make this the rest of the talk. Everything in the world, is going to conspire to keep us from doing the rest of these Zen talks, and yet we are going to power through ever slowly, believe it or not. And yeah, I said I was going to give this talk last night. So, he says that this is very much like the story. There's a famous Zen story in later Zen collections in which a monk goes on a mountaintop and gets greatly enlightened, and then he comes back down into the marketplace with the cats and the beeping, and is jostled, and then gets all upset, and that's the end of the story. So how enlightened are you or detached are you if as soon as you get jostled in the marketplace, you get upset? So, similarly, Linji asked his monks in a lecture assembly here, someone is always on the road but never leaves home. This, again, leaving home is a classic metaphor for, could mean many things, but definitely means becoming a monk or a nun. Well, another leaves home but is not on the road. That would be the middle way, the path of the Buddha. Which is worthy? Leaving home commonly refers to being, yes. Linji says that monastic practices are not Buddhist ways. Much as Huarong told Mazu that sitting in meditation, trying to be someone else, is killing the Buddha. Instead, Linji suggests doing nothing in particular But again, like the Taoists and Wu Wei, that doesn't mean doing nothing. It means, in a sense, doing everything slowly and paying attention to what you're doing and not necessarily not doing anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't have popped his master in the mouth. See the previous talks. And don't pop me in the mouth, please. There are a bunch of blind, bald-headed fools, Linji says, who, having stuffed themselves with rice, sit doing Chan Zen-style meditation practice, trying to stop the flow of thoughts, stop them from arising, hating clamor and chaos, demanding silence. This is like Potapada of the long discourses, as I mentioned at the time. But these aren't Buddhist ways. The teachings of the Buddhas call for no special projects. Just act ordinary without trying to do anything in particular. Take a crap, piss, get dressed, eat your rice, and if you get tired, lie down. Fools may laugh at me, but the wise know what I mean. Which means, of course, the meaning is beyond the words, as it always is in the interweaving of semantics and meaning and reality. And what does he mean by saying, nah, just do A, B, and C? I don't know. You get what I mean. Linji does not expect his students to understand anything he teaches them completely, but he does expect them to understand things somewhat and then somewhat more, making progress by degree. Again, a bucket fills drop by drop from the Dhammapada. Unfortunately, monks fail to believe in themselves, which makes them seek something outside of themselves, that's the story of Huineng, and miss the truth that is right in front of them. Here come a bunch of long quotes of Linji. The teachings of the Buddhas is profound and strange and hard to fathom, again mysterious like the Tao, though one can understand it to some degree. Relativism. I spend all day explaining it in detail to you, you jerks, but you students pay no attention. 1,000, 10,000 times you trample right over it with your feet, the ground beneath your feet for the Taoists. But you are sunk in darkness. It has no shape or form, that's very much the Tao, yet its lone brightness gleams forth. But students don't have faith enough, and instead base their understandings on words and phrases. Their years pile up to 50, and all they do, Linji himself died at 52, and all they do is go off on side roads, carrying their dead corpses on their backs, racing all over the world with their load of baggage. The day will come when they'll have to pay for all those straw sandals they've worn out. Straw sandal with Joshu is a symbol for Bodhidharma and him dragging his rice corpse bag from India to China for some stupid reason. Why was that? What a jerk. Also, Hegel and many other German idealists and many other thinkers around the world do consider language or concepts without practice in life to be dead corpses. So the next phrase of Linji here is awesome. He says, fellow believers, do not use your minds in a mistaken manner, but be like the sea that rejects the bodies of the dead. Now that is an awesome combination of all of this, because the Tao and Taoist teachings in Chuang-Tzu definitely tell you be like the sea and be larger. That's very much Nietzsche, again speaking of, well, post-Kant and Hegel and post-German idealism, more German proto-existential romanticism of sorts, says don't be, be like the sea, and very much sounds like a Taoist, and says be larger and lower than others and thus be wider and more alive. Says, and be like the sea that rejects the bodies of the dead. Well, unfortunately, people drown in their shipwrecks in China and in Greece and everywhere. And the sea seems to reject the bodies of the dead because they wash up on shore, kind of like Laura Palmer. And it's like, it's almost like the water is rejecting, and water is chaos and fluidity for the Tao. So it's like bodies, and the Tao tells us when we die, we are stiff. And don't be stiff, be fluid and be like a baby, don't be like a corpse. So it's like frozen understandings and words and concepts. The sea rejects those and kind of washes those up on the shore, which is a very cool metaphor, and it takes a lot of understanding of Taoist and Buddhist teaching. While you continue to carry such dead bodies and go racing around the world with them, again carrying dead bodies on your back, you only obstruct your own vision and create obstacles in your mind. When no clouds block the sun, the beautiful light of heaven shines everywhere. When no disease afflicts the eye, it does not see phantom flowers in the empty air. I come from the Haight-Ashbury in Berkeley, so if you're seeing phantom flowers in the empty air, I don't know what you're paying for, man. But yeah, or again, if you are seeing cinnabar sunlight, the Taoist, in the alley behind the system and the man. So you lug your alms bag in this sack of crap that is your body, Linji says. Yes, sack of cat. And you rush off on side roads after your cats, looking for Buddhas, looking for cats, looking for the Dharma. With all this clashing and searching you're doing right now, do you know what it is you're looking for? It's vibrantly alive. It's just like life and everything in the mind and realities everywhere, and it's just going off a little too much. Yet it has no root or stem. Now, Taoists say it has root and stem, and Buddhists would also in certain ways say it has root and stem, but we had Hui Neng say there's no mirror and there's no stand. What kind of jerk are you people? You can't gather it up. You can't scatter it to the winds. The more you search for it, Linji continues to lecture, the farther away it gets. But don't search for it, and it's right before your eyes. Its miraculous sound always in your ears. That's the sound of that snap that I made before. There's a bunch of old bald-headed fools, he says. You gotta like this. He's like, he's dissing his own, he's coming out swinging like many a fine stand-up comedian has done. If you know your audience, you go out right for the jugular for him and say, kill the Buddha. All right, then. There's a bunch of old bald-headed fools who can't tell good from bad, but who spy gods here, see devils there. As I always like to point out, when he's like, a bunch of gods and devils these people are seeing. They may very well believe in gods and devils, and they're like, these people full of it. Point to the east, gesture to the west. It's clearly symbolic, by the way. East would be the rising sun. West is where the sun sets. So actually point to the east, gesture to the west. And you find east and west throughout human forms of thought, but definitely in Buddhist thought. And you have why did Bodhidharma come from the west, kind of like from the dead and from the land, from corpses, and then he's going to leave a sandal, or he left a sandal in the grave, a single one, which is important for Joshu next. Point to birth, gesture towards death and resolution and completion, as if things are going to be fixed or final. Say that they love a blue sky. We're going to blue sky it. It's nice and open and up above. Or say that they love it when it rains, comes down, and resolves. They'll have a lot to answer for one day when they stand before old Yama, old Lord of Death, have him a little bit in the Upanishads, and have to swallow a ball of red-hot iron. Folks from good families let themselves be bewitched by this gang of wild fox spirits. Foxes' heads split open like the jackals. Fox spirits are manyness and many trickster desires in the Zen tradition and in Buddhist tradition and in China here. And again, lion roars, jackals' heads split open in India, fox spirits in China. Yama, Lord of Death, swallowing a ball of red-hot iron. I have said often, Dante's circles of hell really appear more in China and in Buddhist China, specifically with realms of different kinds of punishment, and then Marco Polo goes over there, possibly gets pasta, and then you have Dante talking in a very not Catholic, but very Catholic weird circles of hell kind of way, in a way that does not appear in the Christian tradition earlier in a popular way, as far as I understand. And swallowing a ball of red-hot iron is what happens if you are someone who has misused your voice, or you are how would you misuse your voice with the spirit and the wind? Well, you're a liar. And if human beings tell truths in a certain sense, and human truth is sort of a lie as the truth is the lie, well, then you'd have to pass through the hell world karmically of having swallowed a ball of red-hot iron. Funny enough, whatever else this means, swallowing a ball of red-hot iron, what's up, buddy? Swallowing a red-hot cat. Swallowing a ball of red-hot iron is also then here, not only the hell world of being a liar, and now you have to swallow a ball of red-hot iron, like if you are vain, you get flayed, skinned, because you're vain about your skin, so of course the punishment fits the crime, capiche? Is that actually the Buddhists then go on to say, and this is wonderfully paradoxical, like so much Zen then plays with truth in such brilliant, simple reversals. Getting enlightened and trying in the final stages of being enlightened, there is at least one, I think maybe Hakuin says, in Japan, that becoming enlightened is like trying to swallow a ball of red-hot iron, which, funny enough, is like, it's like the punishment and enduring the punishment of having lied, and specifically going through that hell, which is a very deep way of referring to subjectivity and objectivity, or allowing subjectivity to be transmuted or alchemically transferred and turned into, very Taoistically, something like through process or karmic Buddhist process, something where the lie becomes the truth and subjectivity becomes true mind and objectivity. It does seem like a lot of that is woven together and implied in this very unique Chinese culture. So Linji continues. You throw away your head and then hunt for a head. That is a recurring metaphor as well. Where's your head at? You know? Says Bataille. And you can't seem to stop yourselves. You're like a bodhisattva who in the midst of the Pure Land still hates the state of common mortals and prays to become a sage. Nietzsche's Zarathustra passes up who could be an Indian, we don't know, forest dweller, right in the beginning of Zarathustra. And the guy's like, I love God, and so I'm out here. And Nietzsche's kind of like clearly being like, you love God and hate humanity. Well, let's pass that early stupid stage right the heck by. Because if you hate humanity, if you're up on a mountaintop with this, again, Nietzsche did not unfortunately know much of Buddhism, knew a little, did not like it. Probably did not have access to this Zen much in the slightest. I can double down on that when I check everything over, but I'm pretty sure Nietzsche knew very little, if nothing, of Zen at the time. Which is sad, because a lot of his metaphors do seem very Taoist and very Zen, but he probably did not have much, if any, access to that much at all, and didn't esteem it as high if he did. And so, if you hate common mortals, but you love the Buddha, that's clearly a very stupid saint and sage, or even God being. People that have yet, people like that, those kind of God beings that are still choosy and judgy, want to speak to your manager, still have yet to forget about making choices. Their minds are still occupied with thoughts of purity or impurity. They are philosophers right outside the Lotus Sutra's burning house. They have not yet gotten to smiling on all like the Buddha. But the Chan school doesn't see things that way. Because the Chan school, it's not about extinguishing ego or pride or anything. It's just living with it all Taoistically. What counts is the present moment. There's nothing that requires a lot of time. Now that is played off, if you notice in Linji, a lot of this is sudden versus gradual enlightenment. A bucket does fill drop by drop. You are supposed to position yourself to get it. But suddenly, because it's just a pure moment, we all share the same mind. Linji is a bedwetting devil who suddenly is this amazing genius. Because it can take no time at all, and then it does, and then it doesn't. There's a lot of good plays on that are counterintuitive, brilliant jokes, if you know that is here in the stuff, which is why we're covering this first. There is nothing that requires a lot of time. If you have human intelligence, how long does it take for humanity to evolve scientific objectivity? Well, if scientific objectivity is at its best human intelligence checked and refined, then actually it takes no time at all for you to have scientific objectivity. You just have to interact and slowly interact with others better rather than worse. It's not that you can just be right about things out of nowhere. But scientific objectivity or human intelligence is all around you stupidly all the time. It takes no time at all for it. But to come up with a better vaccine of anything would take a lot of time. It's just the intelligence to develop it is already here all around you, so that takes no time at all. To translate this into modern secularese, in a sense. Especially we could go political understanding, but let's not even go there. Everything, oddly enough, everything I am saying to you is for the moment only medicine to cure the disease. A little vaccination. Ultimately, it has no true reality. This is again what these are expedient means. If ultimately all is subjective, the only reason they're telling you things is to shove you a tiny bit this way and that way, so you're facing the right way. If you can see things this way, you will be true men who have left home, free to spend 10,000 in gold each day. It's like you have a secret trust fund, as again the king who, in the Buddhist metaphor, gets drunk and forgets that he's a king because all the gold is sewed into his coat. It's better than that than in his stomach, but that actually would be a bit more Mahayana with it. Don't let any, I believe that's a Lotus Sutra teaching also, very Chinese, Indian originally, but Chinese Mahayana traditional Buddhism. Don't let any old teacher put his stamp of approval on your face. Don't say you understand Chan or the way, which putting it on your way, you're like, I come from this monastery, I'm this guy. These are the people establishing these texts that establish which monasteries are good, which establish who talked to whom. And don't let just some master put, oh, I'm from this monastery, I'm great. No, you're not. You're a jerk. So it's, again, while they're establishing this, actually, as human cultures do, they're like, don't let just some jerk be that. And, of course, in the text, they are, even ironically enough, don't you think, establishing that. Again, it's like rain you just can't take or a free ride on your wedding day. Don't say you understand Chan or the way, spouting off like a waterfall. All of that sort of thing is karma leading to hell. There's no teaching outside, and even what's on the inside can't be grasped. That is worth repeating, because he very much puts emphasis on that line. There is no teaching if all is mind, and if it's just slowly paying attention to it and letting that build up into suddenly and gradually this way and that way, which seems to be what Zen is about, very much more than any sort of formula. Even as they form these formulas and formulae, there is no teaching outside. And even what is on the inside, meaning we all have mind, and all is mind outside you, inside you, even what is on the inside cannot be grasped. I will let several other koan cases make that point very well. He continues, when students today fail to make progress, what is their fault? The fault lies in the fact that they don't have faith in themselves. Think about his origin story, Koan Enlightenment. His Koan case, and the moments of his life are broken into these sorts of study cases, koans, of what happened to him. If you don't have faith in yourself, then you'll be forever in a hurry, trying to keep up with everything around you. You'll be twisted and turned by whatever situation you're in, and you can never move freely. Buddha says extinguish the ego, but then the Buddha also says a lot of things, if you watch the talks on the long discourses, etc., in which you're not even supposed to be hooked on relativism or Buddhism. That is one-sidedness, according to the Buddha. So all this is actually laid out by Buddha. It's just taking it in a very new way in China. But if, he says, you can stop this mind and mine from running on tangents that goes rushing around moment by moment looking for something, then you'll be no different from the patriarchs and Buddhas. Unsurprisingly, Linji questions the abilities of masters and teachers such as himself. Linji mocks his students for taking notes, saying, in a big book they copy down the rantings of some old fool. This is the Linji record. That line was included in this text in some stupid book or scroll that happens to be in your hand right now. This is very much the Lotus Sutra. The Buddha himself says, if somebody were to spread this very teaching right now, I don't know, they'd get a whole lot of amazing universes of gemstones of karma. I don't know if there were a text right now. I don't get it. It's like there's a text right now, right here, could be shared with people. I don't get it. It's like in some stupid book they're copying down all these things I'm ranting at you through a stupid internet camera. Don't be too taken down with my pronouncements either. Don't worry about what I'm thinking. Maybe I like this, maybe I like that. Who cares? Why? Because pronouncements are without basis or underpinning. Something painted for a time on the empty sky. Paintings on the sky is now going to become also a very Zen phrase. It fits in with many koan responses. As with a painter and their many colors. As I note again, people who come to koan cases and don't know the history would not look at it like a Chinese Zen monk, because a Chinese Zen monk would know all of this, or at least even if they were slapped in the face with this stuff the first time and they didn't read all of this stuff, they would sit in the monastery for years, they would do studies, and they would come about with these examples, and at some point they would make connections while sitting and focusing on the koan cases, such that when Linji mentions several things that appear in the koan cases, he then, in his sermon, they're reading all of this, even if they didn't have the pleasure of being there originally. So clearly, if you're looking at Zen koans and it's like, well, this is just mysterious, well, it's one of those things where I don't speak Chinese, but in context, they're giving examples and tying it to Buddhist teachings from India, and none of these people speak the Indian. He is likely thinking of the Lankavatara Sutra, remember, of Bodhidharma. That was originally the Buddhist text that this here is replacing, and the story of Huineng's verse painted on the wall instead of the mural from that sutra. The original text of what Chan is supposedly based on, and then now really isn't very much because of this and other texts fashioned like this text we're going through right now, about 1,000 years ago in China. Many great sages, such as Lao Tzu, Heraclitus of ancient Greece, Jesus, and others throughout history, have told others to look and see for themselves rather than hang on particular words literally, an idea the Buddha and other ancient sages could easily find in the Vedas and Upanishads. The sea of breath below the navel, Linji says, stirs into motion. The teeth batter and mold it, and it comes out as a statement of an idea. So we know for certain that these are mere phantoms. That's a great old school pun. We know that there's a sea of breath in your stomach, lungs, that stirs up. You chatter it out of your teeth. So we know that human words are mere chattering ghosts. In fact, ghosts are very much made of wind in the old world, and like air and smoke and such. And it sounds odd to say, but yeah, because that's old physics and such, and it's all sort of enchanted and alive. It's more modern conceptions where ghosts are merely, and even ethereal means made of ether, and is Aristotle, and is just higher kinds of firelight or something. Other dimensions of it, again, that's more modern conceptions. So he's like, so we know all this is ghosts. And again, these guys do believe in ghosts plenty. And then he's like, so we know this is mere spirits and they can't really touch you, all these human words. Linji says, there are some who go to Mount Wutai looking for Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. They're wrong from the very start, going up some physical mountain looking for some guy whose wisdom itself, the highest of Buddhist virtues, philosophy, love of wisdom. Manjushri isn't on Mount Wutai. Would you like to know Manjushri? Would you like to get to know him, kids? You here in front of my eyes, carrying out your activities, from first to last, never changing. Wherever you go, never doubting. This is the living Manjushri. Of course, if Manjushri is everywhere, he's on Mount Wutai and everywhere else. Not speaking so specifically. Linji also says Buddhas and demons, desires and fears are the unavoidable furniture of our existence. The furniture of your house. Which is Taoism plus Buddhism. You don't extinguish the self. You don't extinguish stupid desire because that's the chattering monkeys. Let them, and you if they want to, because you're not actually getting fully rid of anything in reality and making sure no one ever sees the color green ever again. That's not what you're actually doing. Suppose there were a substance made of Buddhas and devils, Linji lectures, blended without distinction into a single body, like water and milk mixed together. He's getting this legendary beast from India. The legendary Hamsa goose can drink only the milk and leave the water behind. This is a metaphor found in Indian thought, and that's how this Buddhist guy in China gets it. That there's a goose that can drink milk, and if you mix milk and water in order to weaken milk, perhaps, maybe you don't have enough and it needs to go around, the Hamsa goose could drink out the water and leave just the milk, which suggests leaving the cream or the milk, and taking the bad or the weak out of life and leaving the good and the cream. The keen-eyed followers of the way thrust aside Buddhas and devils alike. That suggests don't be like the goose and try to separate the two, and that's actually separation. While you love sages and loathe common mortals, you're still bobbing up and down in the sea of birth and death. Bobbing up and down in birth and death, well, don't bob up and down in it so much. Smile like the Buddha. Don't be like those out of the house, but are still fascinated with transformations in the fire, still inside the mouth of Plato's cave. If you have doubts in your mind for an instant, that's the Buddha devil. The Buddha devil. Buddha when he's a devil. Could be at any time for anybody if they're a jerk in the name of the Buddha, yeah, and that's a serious crime, and that's so it must occur. That's how you get your head struck clean off like the Buddha devil. But if you can understand that the 10,000 things were never born, that's very Tao, that the mind is like a magician's trick. Abacadabra and a lot of trick boxes and tricks come from China and then the Middle East, which is why Europeans dress up in Middle Eastern garb and as if they are from China, as well as the Middle East, and go abracadabra, because a lot of technologies and things come into the Renaissance, and it's with magic. A lot of magic acts and special effects is entertainment as much as it then is technology for everything else in life. And so, like a magician's trick, and these Chinese magician's tricks are much of, if you look into the history of all this, Islamic and then European tricks. So the mind is like an optical illusion and a magician's trick, which is not totally an illusion for the magician. It's a sleight of hand. If so, then not one speck of dust, not one thing will exist. Dust in the mirror is a Shuangzi metaphor that Huineng uses. Everywhere will be clean and pure, and this will be Buddha. Buddha and devil just refer to two states, one stained, one pure. That's relying on Mazu and Huineng language. You who come here and there, you all have a mind to do something. You search for Buddha, search for the Dharma, search for emancipation, search for a way to get out of the threefold world. Idiots, trying to get out of the world. Where will you go? I pun on this all the time. I love Joshu. Idiots, trying to get out of the world. Where will you go? If you remember, Mazu is sitting there trying to meditate and the guy's polishing a tile. You know, it's like, where are you going to go, kid? Like, oh, you're going to get out of something by meditating. Well, then, what are you trying to run away from? Let's find out. The Buddha and the patriarchs are just praiseful words and phrases. Window dressing. Do you want to know what the threefold world is? It is nothing other than the mind, the ground that you who are listening to the Dharma, these lessons, are standing on. When you have a moment of greed in your mind, that is the world of desire. This is the threefold world Buddhist cosmology also he is explaining, which could shoot right by someone not familiar with it. When you have a moment of greed, that is the world of desire. When you have a moment of anger, that is the world of form. When you have a moment of ignorance, that is the world of formlessness. That's actually strict Buddhist cosmology of an earlier sort. From Indian schools. These are the pieces of furniture in your house. Like Plato, oddly in the Republic, the cosmos is shaped like the city is shaped like the mind. So the cosmos fixtures are the mental fixtures. Inside is the shadow puppets and the inner. And when you have a moment of ignorance, well, the thing is that ignorance and stupid and selfishness are part of the fixture of the human mind and humanity. So if you are getting upset at prostitutes, lepers, thieves, a bunch of crap, well, if that's the furniture of the house of humanity, and this does open a lot of questions about what future to look for or why, and in fact, Stoics, again, as we've been going over, are like, well, slavery, that's your lot in life, hooray, and that's not great answers for things. But insofar as dealing with humanity as human beings and all these jerks, Marcus Aurelius the Stoic says, well, we've come into this world to work with all these jerks and your coworkers, so why not deal with jerks today? Hello, Steve, how are the kids? It's that these are the pieces of furniture in your house. As a moment of Joshu, what's it like before the sword of Manjushri has fallen? And he says, densely packed together with the furniture in your house. And then he says, what is it after the sword of enlightenment has fallen? And Joshu says, wide open spaces with the same furniture in the same house. But wide open spaces. That, I think, is extremely instructive and is very much the meaning of what they're getting to, because this is very twisting away from extinguish the self, as I continue to say. The ego's always there for Bodhidharma. You just get around it with the mind. The tallest thing is the self. Furniture, as Linji says, in your house and others, which is all the same house plenty, and the mind. So this now gets us, we are a half hour in, this gets us to Koan Practice, reading and testing students, which this stuff is the Linji quotes in which he and other Zen masters who follow are going to give very confusing lectures and snippets of talks which are specifically cut down in order to make them confusing and frustrating, as I have mentioned. Now that's fine, that doesn't mean that actually it all has a very simple meaning, and yet, of course, if you are studying this stuff, it would be expected not just that you would read koans and then not understand other texts. You would be studying many Buddhist texts of the Buddha, the long discourses, as well as the Zen records, and it would be expected that you would basically, in being a monk or a nun, you're running away from home to become a scholar for a lot of these folks. To become literate is the only opportunity in your life. So if you did that, whether or not you actually liked reading in the first place, I'm sure it takes all kinds, you would probably know all of these examples that they're going to play with throughout Joshu and the Blue Cliff Record and the Gateless Gate. So before we get there, it's important to talk about the lion's roar, stuff Mazu does to people, pulling noses, and it's important, of course, to go through what Linji's school is doing and saying and redacting into what they are presenting you with as his lessons and lectures and teachings. So, these are the quotes here that I've put together. I've been thematizing the work of Linji here, also working systematically through the text and balancing both of those. And these quotes here, we are going to finish out this and power through the rest of this talk here, that this is very much the sage of our minds coming in and out of the holes of our face as we communicate and make meaning and mouth karma and semantics with others and have reality that means anything to us at all. Otherwise, the mind wouldn't be this way and that way about anything, and they wouldn't be jerking you back and forth, would they? And Linji has a lot of quotes here, which we will finish out with the Linji talks. 4 talks is enough on Linji, in which he says many things which for the koans to follow will make a lot more sense. And hopefully make sense of his shouts as well, if you go back over the talks. So, Linji said, "I have no teaching to give to people. All I do is untie knots." Schopenhauer, who thought he was a Buddhist as a German, said that the divide between the self and other is the knot of the world. And R.D. Laing, the psychologist and psychiatrist of 60s counterculture, wrote Knots, which is a very interesting book about knots our modern minds get into when working, dating, doing modern things. And he was trying to show Buddhist knots in the mind. So, and Manjushri, with the Sword of Wisdom, who's already been militaristically and violently referred to several times, cut off the head of the Buddha. Who does that? Well, Manjushri Wisdom happens to have a raised weapon and blade of death, so seems to be the likeliest candidate for cutting off and striking off that head. Although there's other militant-looking gods and monsters in the canon. That you cut through the knot. What's the easiest way of getting through a knot? Cutting through the thing straight through. So, here are some quotes. "Look at the puppets performing on the stage. Their every moment is controlled backstage, just like my behavior in life is controlled by my cats, and they set the pace and temper of my life, a la Heidegger building you a bookshelf in the middle of the night. So when someone comes to me, I can tell exactly what they are like. Whatever circumstances they come from, I take all their words and utterances to be so many dreams and ghosts." Already got that. "But when I see someone who has learned to master the situation, I know that here is the secret meaning of the Buddhas." Holding up a flower, the guy. "There's never been," I love this quote, I say this often. I teach philosophy, or I try to, but you can't, can you? "There's never been one of these students of the way who come from all over, who didn't appear before me depending on something. So I start right out by hitting them there. If they come with a raised hand, I hit the raised hand. If they come mouthing something, I hit them in the mouth." Well, he hit his master in the mouth after his mouth said something, and his master did too. "And if they come making motions with their eyes, I hit them in the eye." Oddly specific. "I have yet to find one who comes alone and free." I have yet, Confucius said in the Chinese tradition, I'm not perfect, and I have yet to meet anybody who likes studying more than sex, he says twice, and I have yet to meet a perfect person. What's with all of these jerks and me? Come on. I have yet to find a single individual ever who does not walk in here, waltz in, the master sits in a chamber, the student comes in for koan practice as the guest, into the host as the subjective, wandering towards what they believe or expect in weird ways is objective reality and the lessons of life, the philosophy, the wisdom, the science, the understanding, the truth, the objectivity. They, as subjective, motivated individual, come to the objective, and I have yet to find one who does not come in holding something in the hand, holding something in the mouth, having something in the eyes, so all I do is I just hit them right there, is what he says. I have yet to find one who doesn't. They're all caught up in silly devices of old men. We are making a new genre of text right now. Linji sort of knows it. The people writing this down know it. Whoever comes here, I never let them slip by me. I mean, how would you let them if it's that easy, you know? Always seeing where they come from. If you come in a certain way, you'll just lose track of yourself. And if you don't come in that way, if you try to be tricky with me, and if you don't come in holding something in the hand or the eye, you'll just tie yourself up without rope. It's just going to bind you up in knots. It's just going to happen. You're going to get bound up in trying to not be this, not be that anyway, which is still holding something in your hand or away from you or something. Whatever hour of day or night, don't wander around recklessly passing judgments. Recklessly judging. Slow down with the judging less, wider open spaces. Whether you know what you're doing or not, you'll be wrong in every case. This much I state clearly. Let me say those two lines one more time slowly, because we're going to be having a lot of koan cases and a lot of slapping and a lot of just silence after a shout. And it's like, I think he won because nobody got slapped, sort of. Whether you know what you're doing or not, you'll be wrong in every case. So it's clearly not about winning here, is not about not being wrong at all. Never, know how, nothing, to very hardcore kind of relativistic. We can find a mistake in every... I've never found one of these guys. So you're going to be wrong in every case. Think about his life story. What did he realize, after he got hit enough times? He's like, why are you being so self-centered after I hit you and you think about you? And then he says, immediately after, this world is perfectly free to criticize or condemn me all it likes, which he repeats and says more than once. Thank you for standing so long. And that's the end of that particular talk. You're wrong in every case. You can call me wrong as much as you like. Peace out. I'm done. Mic drop. I don't care about being wrong much, do I? I'm like a Taoist trickster sage. If I'm wrong, maybe it's for a better purpose, Again, this is a bit dangerous because if he really is a jerk, that could be entirely and weirdly misleading. But of course, he thinks this is showing everything in the full light of day. Otherwise, this would not be a sacred text and then practiced by blind, bald-headed old fools who eat rice all day. Linji told the assembly, sometimes we take away the person, but not the situation. And sometimes we take away the situation, but not the person. Sometimes we take away both, and sometimes we take away neither. That's Nagarjuna's 4, the famous Buddhist logician. A monk asked, so okay, what is it to take away the person? I'm going to leave this nice and ambiguous and not comment on these. Linji said, warm sunshine spreads over the earth, and a little child's hair hangs down. The monk asked, what is it to take away the situation? And Linji said, the king's commands have spread throughout the realm, and generals beyond the border no longer taste the smoke and dust of battle. The robbers in the countryside have been soundly defeated. King rules the generals, no robbers. The monk asked, what is it to take away both? And Linji said, all word is cut off from the outer regions. Once again, countryside metaphor. And they stand alone and apart. The monk asked, what is it to take away neither? And Linji said, the king sits in command of his jeweled hall, and old folks in the country sing their songs. Taking away neither seems the best option, or at least seems happiest here. The king's cool, and all the old people are all chilling singing folk songs, and everything's fine. That does seem rather there's a king, but also weirdly Taoistic. The old people are just kind of random old people and they're singing songs. The words are cryptic, but Linji tells us several things in sermons that speak about the roles of guest and host and the dynamic of the koan encounters and interviews that continue to be relevant here. When reading the puzzling koans, continue to think of these things. So here again, a bunch of quotes. Followers of the way, we're about 45 minutes in. I figure another at least, again, this may turn out to be a rather hour, but if we go through with another 15 minutes of quotes, my apologies, but these things do need to be mentioned and before getting into koans. And Joshu. Followers of the way, in the view of the Chan school, dying and living proceed in proper order. Dying and living, proper order backwards. Those are words that come up a lot. Those engaged in study must pay strict attention to this, study, and these texts. Thus, when a host and guest greet one another, there will be an exchange of remarks. Koan practice. Perhaps one party will respond to something and assume a certain form. assume a certain form, or perhaps perform some activity with his entire body. Perhaps try tricking the other by feigning delight or anger. Feigning, pretending to be happy or angry. Perhaps reveal half of his body. You perhaps come riding on a lion or an elephant, a lower bestial something. If the student truly knows what they're doing, and a naked bestial something, they'll give a shout, well, that's Linji's move, and then first try holding out a sticky trap. What is he? So he's saying here, if a student's really good, they'll try fooling the master themselves to test the master and see how it is, because you may as well test the master. If this is a testing fight, well, then you test the master to test, so the master tests you, and then you're testing how the master tests people, aren't you? Oddly enough. He's saying the good students hold out a sticky trap for the master. The teacher, failing to recognize this, so the master's screwing up, as a mere situation, proceeds to climb up on top of it and begin striking poses or donning attitudes. It's like, so the teacher's like, oh, I understand what you just did. And begins like feigning, oh, yes, or no. In this, the student gives a shout, but the teacher refuses to abandon his approach. Now, this again seems like maybe the teacher is all along pretend to be the idiot. In this case, the sickness is located above the diaphragm and below the heart where no cure can get at it. And those could be tricky words if this is a sickness unto death. It's like, well, maybe actually above the diaphragm and below the heart. In Chinese stuff, the heart is often somewhat the head, and the stomach would be desire. So the upper and the lower, which is very much, has a lot of meanings and things woven into it. Well, that would be where the bellows of the Tao are, if you read the Tao, and no cure can get at the hinge and the sickness and the disease, because that is the furniture of the house very much. This is called the guest seeing through the host, which would be the student seeing through the master. So it seems like the student would win here, perhaps. Or perhaps the teacher will not come out with any object of his own, second scenario, starting as the first, but will wait for a question from the student and then snatch it away, like changing the situation. Break frame. The student, seeing his question snatched away, won't let go, but holds on for dear life. What's the meaning? Why are we doing this from Bodhidharma? Well, look at that cat passing by. Okay, wait a minute. Like, is that still what I was talking about? This is the case of the host seeing through the guest. The master wins. Perhaps there is a student who, responding with a clean, pure situation, presents himself before the teacher. The teacher can tell this is just a situation, and grabs it and throws it down a hole, like Alice. The student says, a truly great teacher, because the student's an idiot. Instantly, the teacher says, hopeless, can't tell good from bad. The student gives a low bow. This is called the host meeting up with a host. This is a very good moment. I mention often, it can seem really puzzling when you read the Zen koans, and then in the commentaries on the koans, it will say, well, this guy clearly won. What a great guy. And then somebody else will be like, well, this commentator doesn't understand. The other guy won. What an idiot. I mean, but whenever you read the commentaries, it's like they're trying to specifically fool you away from whatever you would have thought. And the commenters are like, it clearly isn't what you thought. And then it's like, it clearly isn't what that other guy thought. Well, they're taught by a guy who says, whenever anybody puts forward a position, I just toss it down a hole and and then I see how they respond. If I take your mind and if I take your situation, I'm like, well, it isn't what you think it is. How do you respond? And then I don't have to be telling the truth or a lie, because in a certain sense, I'm doing the truth by what I'm doing to you. And see if I'm testing you, then whether I tell the truth or tell a terrible joke or lie to you, I am like the cops, more in America, yes, than elsewhere even. I am lying to you in order to seek truth, oddly enough. Whether or not you like the practices here. Or, and here we have others, he's just spinning them out here. And in fact, you have a both and neither, because so he's had A, B, both. So what do we have here? Best case, neither. Or there may be a student who puts a collar on his neck, binds himself up in chains, and then comes before the teacher. The teacher proceeds to shackle him with another set of collars and chains. The student is delighted, unaware of what has happened. This is called the guest meeting up with a guest, and guest is inferior to host. Fellow believers, these examples I have cited are all meant to enable you to spy the devil, sort out what's improper, y'all need Jesus, and learn to tell the crooked from the straight. Crooked and straight, classic Taoist metaphors. Y'all need Jesus is not. Followers of the way, when students come here from various regions and we have finished greeting one another as host and guest, the student will make some remark to test the teacher. Co-testing. The student comes out with these tricky words and thrusts them into the teacher's face, as if to say, see if you can understand this. Teaching philosophy. In fact, of course, there are a lot of ways where students are testing you. And of course, if you can't meet the challenge, they're like, meh. And that can really get to you. In fact, in philosophy especially, and I think it can turn a lot of people into bitter idiots, myself especially. You know, I hate all you people. And myself, wait, I love you again. Group hug. Yes? All right. Group hug. Sun. Yes. Sunny gong. Is that basically, of course, students come up to you all the time and are like, see if you can understand this. It's like, I'm testing you. Huh? It's like, wow, that isn't human. If you were the teacher and realized that this was just a situation, which doesn't mean you're right or wrong, but it's like, okay, I'm going to slow down and feel this out, which I have to say, that's really what it is. And having taught philosophy for a couple of years now, going on 14 actually, is that, and hopefully we get out of the 13th year with our lives, is that basically, of course, it's like, okay, well, let's patiently and slowly figure philosophy out. No, I know the answer and blah, 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 which is what I do to you guys. And it's like, well, okay. And honestly, as a philosophy instructor guy person, if you slow down, you're like, okay, let's talk through this slowly. It comes off as wise. And in fact, that very well is what they are saying wisdom is that if you're like, okay, let's trust you and let's slowly talk through this together. It comes off like you know a lot, which is hilarious because, of course, you do, but you actually know to slow down. And a lot of people don't. So you a lot of times have people talking a mile a minute in philosophy. And it's like, I know this, but they don't come off as knowing, and they don't compared to, okay, well, I don't understand your question, but let's work it out. Here, in fact, I have to mention, Confucius says, I'm not perfect. A bumpkin asked me a question. My mind went blank. Still, I hammered away at his problem. Probably didn't hang out with the bumpkin. Confucius is kind of classist. Until I worked out something. Which again is Confucius as a somewhat Zen-like master, as good work has already pointed out. A bit of the koans in Confucius and the Analects. So the student comes to the philosophy teacher Zen master and says, see if you can understand this, and thrusts it in their face. If you were the teacher and realized this is just a situation and you grabbed it and threw it down a hole, then the student would act normal again, and after that would ask for the teacher's instruction. So it's again, you didn't really do anything amazing here. You just like patiently knew that it was a setup. And the student's like, wow, this is a smart guy. I need to pay attention. The teacher would then snatch that up too and treat it as he did the earlier remark. The student then says, very wise, a truly great teacher. Teacher says, you certainly can't tell good from bad. That's unfortunately only the experience a couple of times. Again, thankfully, philosophy and Zen is more than just that, as he's already said. Again, suppose the teacher comes out with a certain chunk of environment. Chunk of environment. Pow! Here's a chunk of your environment. Here it is. You know. And he dangles it in front of the student's face. He's like, huh? What do you think? What about this thing? Look at this. Not this. Don't look at this. Look at this right here. This one, this is something totally different. Look at this. That's just, I mean, this thing right here. That's crazy. Dangles it in front of the student's face like a cat. The student sees through this and at every step acts the master, refusing to be misled by the situation. Acts the master. The teacher then reveals half his body, you, hopefully this is legal, and the student gives a shout. This is also Taoist, as mentioned very much. The student now enters the place where there are all kinds of differences and distinctions. That's like getting out of the burning house at first. Battering the student around with words. That's what I do to you fine people. Breaths of air. The student says, this old bald-headed fool can't tell good from bad. Judges the master the way the student was judged earlier in the alternate universe. The teacher exclaims in admiration, a true and proper follower of the way. Now you almost never have that in Zen. You almost never have the master being like, good job, you're awesome. You get a sticker. And it's not then immediately a slap in the face. Because of course Linji's like, no, here, take the staff. Don't take the staff. It's like, because you're not going to get it. You can't. So the answer is not outside of you, in the staff, in your staff the whole time, or any other part of you, That's again, Snidely Whiplash says, when he has the damsel in distress, now I have her and you'll never get her back nor any other part of her, which is some Taoist-like humor. When students come around from here and there, Linji says, not me, I'll shut up, I classify them into 3 categories according to their ability. In such cases, if a student of less than average ability comes to me, I snatch away the environment, yoink, but leave him his existence. If a student of better than average ability comes to me, I snatch away both environment and existence, yoink, what's left? Well, I'm still here. If a student of truly superior ability comes to me, I do not snatch away anything. Now, again, you don't extinguish anything. I don't snatch away anything. You're a jerk? Great. I'm a jerk. That's great. I can work with that. Without pause, without hesitation. I do not snatch away anything, neither environment, nor existence, nor person. If a student appears whose understanding surpasses all these categories, then I deal with him with my whole body, again, you, and take no account of his ability. The way I do things now, this is Linji at the end of his life, probably, or the height of his career, and he is sitting there telling you the way I do things now, we're about to have all the koan cases. The way I do things now is to go about truly and properly creating and destroying, toying and playing with supernatural transformations, entering every kind of situation but doing nothing wherever I am, not permitting the environment to lead me astray. Whoever comes to me seeking something, I immediately come out to size them up, but they don't recognize me. Then I put on different robes. The student forms an understanding on that basis and begins to be drawn in by my words. Hopeless, this blind bald fool without any eyes. They concentrate on the robe I'm wearing, noting whether it's blue, yellow, red, or white. The elements. If I strip off the robe and enter a clean, pure place, the student takes one look and is filled with desire and longing. This again is sexual body joking, which unfortunately means that's why I was joking earlier about half my body, my whole body. Student is filled with desire and longing. If I throw that away too, the student becomes muddled in mind. I throw away my naked body, empty body. Now the student doesn't know anything, racing around wildly in a distracted manner, exclaiming, like those who exit the burning house of the Lotus Sutra, exclaiming that now I have no robe at all. Then I turn to him and say, do you know the person who wears this robe of mine? Now, who is the person? Who's the man? Who's the man sitting next to the man? Who is the one wearing the robe? Is that Linji? Suddenly he turns his head, and then he can see me at last. Notice all the puns on nakedness, seeing the face, seeing the naked face, seeing the person. Finally, after looking straight at me, they turn their head and see me at last. That's beautiful. Don't get so taken up with the robe. The robe can't move of itself, and we all share the same mind, and mind is mind. The Record of Lingy begins, in fact, exactly as the Platform Sutra of Huineng does, with the governor arriving and asking for Linji's life, which we covered, and a sermon containing his teaching, which we've already covered moments of, as well as many of his lectures. Linji stood in front of the assembly and he said, if I were to discuss the central point of Buddhism from the viewpoint of the Zen patriarchs, then I would not even open my mouth and you would have nowhere to plant your feet. He then invited the assembly to ask questions. He says, perhaps there are some valiant generals here who would like to draw up their ranks and unfurl their banners. This stuff was popular first counterculturally with generals in the power vacuum between the Tong and it's formed in the Tong, but it's popular with generals between the Tong and the Song, and then becomes official in the Song, with support for Linji's house. A monk rose and asked what the meaning of Buddhism is, classic, and Linji gave a shout, classic. The monk bowed, and Linji said, this monk is the kind worth talking to. Well, that was cheap and easy, as if either had said a word. Another monk says, Master, whose style of song do you sing? Whose school do you carry on? Linji said, when I was at Huangbo's place, I asked a question 3 times and I got beaten 3 times. The monk began to reply and Linji struck him, saying, you don't drive a nail into the empty sky. That is something that is a Zen response in many koans classic cases. You don't drive a nail into the empty sky. A high-ranking monk of another school, possibly Tiantai, who's hanging out, who divide the sutras and teachings into periods, says, in accord with that, the 3 vehicles, 3 types of main schools of Buddhism, and 12 divisions of the teachings make the Buddha nature clear enough, don't they? All the books and fancy teachings. Linji said they're wild grass and weeds that have never been cut by your dad, embarrassingly in the shorts. The monk said, surely the Buddha would never deceive people. Wait a minute, all the Buddha's texts and teachings are wild grass that have never been cut? All the precise words and long Indian, complicated philosophical terms that we're supposed to sit here and learn in German as non-native speakers, the heck is all of that? And the monk says, well, surely the Buddha doesn't fool people with all the texts. It's like, wait a minute, are you telling me that all the Christian texts, are you telling me Jesus tricks people? Why are there all these Christian texts if Jesus ever could trick anyone? Jesus can't ever trick anyone. And Linji says, the Buddha, where is he right now? Like, show me this guy if he's not deceiving people. And, of course, that's funny because it's like, oh, the Buddha, not deceiving people. Okay, where is he? So, of course, if you can't find him, well, you're talking about something that's there you can't find. That seems like he's not saying there is nothing. That seems deceptive, doesn't it? In a very simple way. It seems like the Buddha's deceiving people almost, which is dangerous talk. Heretical, possibly. Monk had no answer. Could not move. Shaken. Not stirred. Or too stirred. Linji said, are you trying to fool me right in front of the governor? Step aside. You're keeping others from asking questions. Which is a Zen guy slamming the Tiantai and the precise lotus and the more philosophical understandings. So the folks who have support in the Tong just got slammed in the personification and in this guy, in this example. That was the Tiantai and the Lotus School, and those folks getting slammed in front of the governor by the folks who don't yet have the song support, and this text is more coming together during the song when they do. Linji turns back to the assembly and said, this gathering today is for the sake of Buddhism. Are there any others who want to ask questions? Come forward quickly and ask them. But even if you open your mouth, something in the mouth, what you ask will be completely beside the point. Why do I say this? Because Shakyamuni, one of the official full-on names of the Buddha, said, did he not, referring to these guys are studying all the texts from the beginning, the Dharma is separate from words and writings, and is not involved with direct or indirect causes, getting out of karma, and it's not these words ever so precisely. Well, Zen have done a lot with that, and we won't quote each of those bits. It is because you don't have enough faith today that you find yourself tied up in knots. I'm afraid you will trouble the governor and other officials. Well, these are not, I'm afraid the Buddhist ordinated folks, it is their job to be sacred for the governators and for the people who are doing their government jobs. It is religion's job to be better and wiser and smarter, and the scholars in the Catholic Church more than the governor and the local nobles, because that's their job. It's the monk's job to be literate as the guys who are literate, and the education and the university system. He says, I think these academics here are just going to confuse the government people, and the academics are all just going to muddle their heads with nonsense. Which, of course, this is a guy who is a top scholar. He's like, you scholars are just going to confuse and upset people. And he's saying the ordinated are going to confuse the unordained, the commoners, which is very un-Buddhist and stupid, on purpose. And you guys are going to keep these commoners and these uncommon governors, but commoners, not Buddhists, not Buddhist monks, are going to keep them from realizing their Buddha nature, which is a very Mahayana point. If you say us monks are going to stop the commoners from getting their inner Buddha gold, that is very Mahayana criticism of the monks and the system. It is better for me to withdraw, and I'm out. He gave a shout, thanked them for standing so long, and left without offering a satisfying position, as Bodhidharma did to Emperor Wu. Linji suggests students become formless, taking all positions fluidly. This means flowing like water, as well as standing fast like earth. Remember those colors, and I said elements. Both moving and not moving, as Huineng said of the mind, that the monks arguing over the flag that they share, as their minds are moving against each other, and the mind and the wind. So Linji says here, and again, we are going past an hour, but again, we have the final quotes here, and a lot of this, again, is important if you want to spend some time with the koans. Linji says, If your mind doubts, it is blocked by earth. If your mind craves, it is drowned by water. If your mind seethes, it is seared by fire. If your mind rejoices, it is tossed by air. These guys actually do believe, like Plato, that these elements constitute your brain and mind and heart. So they're not just, but that also they're showing what else do they do. However, if you grasp this, you will not be swayed by your situation, using the elements wherever you are. You can pop up in the east and vanish in the west, pop up in the south and vanish in the north, pop up in the heartland and vanish in the borderlands. I like the borderlands. Pop up in the borderlands and vanish in the heartland. The robbers in the countryside have all been defeated. What is their crime? Can't talk about it. That would be offensive. If you can walk on water as though it were earth, and walk on earth as though it were water. Or he says, you can walk on water as though it were earth, and walk on earth as though it were water. In the Islamic tradition, Jesus says, and Muslims know some Buddhism, back and forth a little bit, don't like it so much. Jesus says, I was asked, how do you walk on water and perform miracles, O Rabbi Lord? And he says, well, a Yahshua leader, Jesus. He says, well, are mud and gold and all that equal in your sight? Slaves and prostitutes and free and noble lords? They're like, nope. What do you mean? He's like, well, they are in mine. And you see that one coming? Linji says, every plant and tree knows how to move back and forth. So does that mean they constitute the way? To the degree that they move, it is due to the element air. The degree, and people were watching trees to understand ancient cosmology. It's like the many, here's the one, rooted. Here are the many, rooted objectivity, moving subjectivity with bias and emotion. To the degree that they move, it is due to the element air. To the degree they do not move, it is the element earth, fixed and unfixed. Neither their moving nor their not moving come from any innate nature to them. It's the situation. It's how they are situated. It would not be all of this fixed, unfixed, if it were not all of the elements together in the situation. If you look towards the area of motion and try to grasp the truth there, it will take up its stand in the area of non-motion. Whenever philosophers and other people try to figure out what is this thing, well, let's start with the opposite here. And if you look towards non-motion, what's the fixture of objectivity in things? We're going to do postmodernism next semester. And try to grasp it there, it will take up its stand in motion. Well, in order to understand what's fixed, let's try to understand it in terms of what's moving around and different. It is like a fish hidden in a pond who now and then slaps the surface and leaps up. The moving and unmoving are simply two types of situations. Those who are the way, who depend on nothing, those who are of the way, who depend on nothing, cause the situations to be in motion or motionless. That is Huineng, your minds as you debate. It's the wind moving, it's the flag moving, which is the fixed earth, and the moving air. It is your minds that are moving and changing from earth to air and back and forth, inside, outside, and in the motions of the karma and the circuitry of you and the world. Finally here, as Linji was entering an army camp for a banquet, he pointed to one of the large wooden gateposts and asked the officer on duty, is this a common mortal or an immortal sage? The officer is just weirded out and doesn't know what to say, and he's not a monk. Maybe he's heard of something. He's like, Huineng had an officer write the verse on the wall for him, who was a guard. This officer standing there as a guard, he's like, so is this like a common mortal or a genius guy, this post? Which, of course, he walks up to a guard at the door and says, this dumb post, is this a genius or not? What is he saying there, huh? Well, he's kind of slapping a guard in the face, and this guy doesn't know what to say and is confused. Yeah, what is he telling this dude he is? Or could risk being? Linji strikes the post with the staff and says, even if you could possibly reply, it would still be just a wooden post. Well, does he think he's better or worse than the dumbass of the wooden post? Or perhaps the guard, who isn't a dumbass at all, of course, nor a wooden post, right? It is and it isn't, right? You can freely go with it's both and the same and it's not, right? Well, it would still just be a wooden post, and I'm an uncarved block of stone according to the Taoists, and I'm some dumbass. Good night, everybody. Fluidity. And he enters the camp. And he freely goes into where the guard is guarding. Okay, well, I'm expected here. I'm a Zen master. The mind of the master is free to flow like water from one interpretation and reality to another situation and throwing one situation down a hole, just resituating it. Throwing the ego down a hole. Oh, look, it's ego back again. How are you doing? How are the kids? And it returns to the world of common sense whenever it is needed to screw with anybody. And in fact, notice the reason I ended up here is because a post is simply just a post. Sometimes a cigar is a cigar and a post is just a post. And we have Taoists of this very period saying sometimes a staff is a staff, a pearl is a pearl. And yes, the mind is tall and yet the mind is wide. Let's leave it all at that and not let the Taoists be even more bawdy here. So, that is getting through Linji. That talk is not so long, but long enough. It's not 245s, though. So much happiness, much sunlight. Again, sunlight and kittens. Again, kittens and cats out there. And I will see you if I ever see you. And next, I'll be seeing you in the form of this camera here as we go through the Joshu, the koans of the Gateless Gate, and the koans, before I write that, of the Blue Cliff Record, which is much of what Zen has given the world so wonderfully.